other dental work. Most major dental plans accepted. More information at knobcreekoralclinic.com.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Aisha Roscoe. Former President Donald Trump keeps repeating the big lie that he won the 2020 election. And that has local election officials around the country fearing for their safety in advance of the 2024 presidential elections. In fact, many of them told NPR's Chris Arnold that they are already facing threats.
This past midterm election, things were getting pretty Principal's office in Coos County, Oregon.
We would have people in this hallway trying to take pictures of everything we're doing with their phones.
Dee Murphy, the county clerk at the time, says local people apparently juiced up on misinformation were camped out inside the building.
Yeah, methods.
And some of them were very mean.
Even though a couple
very
of
mean.
Before Trump
very
won
mean.
This county with 59% of the vote, Murphy and the other election workers say people would still yell in their faces about voter fraud. Over about a month, a security guard stopped people from bringing in a total of 20 guns and 60 knives or other weapons inside. And beyond that, some of the altercations were really frightening.
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, yes, I work with the Coos County Clerk's Office. I have had following me since I left.
During the general election last year, a county worker called day as he was driving around collecting ballots from drop boxes. Was following him.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And what do you think? What's going on? Hey, it's the Big Splat. It's the Big Splat. It's the Big Splat. It's the Big Splat's like the big lie. The big lie's like same as it ever was, right? And there we are. And what are you going to do about it, right? There you are. What are you going to do about it? There you are. What are you going to do about it? There you are. What are you going to do about it? Yep, everything works.
Alive and well in a large chunk of the Republican Party.
Yeah, alive and well in a big chunk of it. I mean, guys, do you not know you were getting played? Here it is, Sunday. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. Look how beautiful day it is. What a beautiful day. But I can taste that burning Canada old growth. That happened. How did something under of 8 million square miles of forest burn up? And not just burn up like it was the sun, right? Because I used to be a fireman, back in the day. I was there in Myrna, New York, just outside of Ithaca, volunteer fireman. Right across the street from me, I was moved into a new little. I work for Gus Electric, Daddy's Electric, and that had been the family. The Bear family had been the family of doing electric work in those 3 counties up there near Ithaca. Generations, easy, right? And let's see, weekly report available. I don't care. Anyway, so Ithaca is a really amazing place. Everywhere you are, there you go, and everywhere is an amazing place. Right here, I'm going to start up my mystery school again, right? I'm going to get a website and get people to come up, and I'll show them paranormal experiences. Woo! Because I live right next to some what might be, Colonel Sanders, Grandpa Cockroach, the slaves, the Tweakers, these folks are all what would be called demonically possessed. Right? Now, you have to realize everyone in America is demonically depressed, if not oppressed, if not, just straight up. There I was in upstate New York, right next to Ithaca, and Ithaca's pretty heavyweight school. It's got more endowment than anything. We now, Supreme Court just threw out, I love Donald Trump, because that carrot head, that big whale, that pimple on the butt of the emotional catharsis of everyone freaking out about the big splat. If you guys do not understand that he was placed there, I mean, he spent 10 years, the only place he ever made money, not lost, and then hook scouts, Donald Trump is a grifter with a G, not a drifter like the black guy singing, ooh, ah, ooh, ah. No, he's a grifter. But so is JoJo the youth salesman. So is every politician in there. No one's in there for this, Well, they may be, because this is just a trope, right? But I'm wearing it, and I've been wearing it since June 19th, right? Just like I celebrate Christmas 24/7, 365, I'm going to celebrate liberty, justice for all, freedom, 365, right? But real specifically, from June 19th to, I don't know, maybe Labor Day, because we're all friggin' slaves. Do-ah, ooh-ah, so. Oh, do. Boop, 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 boop.
Came with a rebranding. This isn't really about about harm to minorities. Except that's not really true. Oyan Poon, who studied Harvard's admission data. There is no evidence that there's a practice of anti-Asian discrimination. Poon is a visiting scholar at the University of Maryland College Park and an expert in race and admissions. She says the data does not back up Bloom's claim. Anti-Asian racism is very real, and there is evidence that there was bias by some admissions officers, ranking Asian Americans lower on personality traits. But Poon says what happened here is something different. Predominantly white conservative political forces are leveraging this experience of being racially marginalized among Asian Americans to say, yeah, and by the way, there's this policy that you're not benefiting from. I feel like Asian Americans have been used. That's Jeff Chang, a senior advisor at the social justice nonprofit Race Forward. There is an entire history of Asian Americans working very hard to get affirmative action. In the 80s at Berkeley, he and other students got the University of California to admit they were suppressing Asian American admissions in favor of white students. The name of the group he co-founded? The Student Coalition for Fair Admissions. The name of the group Edward Bloom founded 2 decades later, Students for Fair Admissions. Chang doesn't think the similar name is a coincidence. I know that they had to have been reading the stuff that we were writing. The lawsuits Bloom filed on behalf of Students for Fair Admissions didn't name any Asian American students, but 1 or 2 have spoken publicly, including with Fox's Laura Ingraham.
We found one student from that group willing to tell us why he believes he's the victim of racial discrimination. And it turns out he's a minority, too.
18-year-old Georgia Tech student John Wong was rejected from his top 6 schools despite stellar grades and test scores. So he turned to Students for Fair Admissions, who ran his numbers through their model.
Edward Bloom told me my results, and so they said I had a 20% chance of getting admission to Harvard as an Asian American, and then a 95% chance as an African American.
This is key to the attack on affirmative action. Asian American rejection is directly tied to Black and Latino acceptance, says Sally Chen with Chinese for Affirmative Action. Pitting Asian American communities against, in particular, Black and Latinx communities is about undermining the accomplishments of a lot of Black and Latinx students. And she says it taps right into the model minority myth. That's the stereotype that Asian Americans have been able to bootstrap their way to the American dream solely because they are hardworking, says Janelle Wong, director of the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland, College Park. It is a really important tool that has been used historically to undermine other non-white groups pressing for justice, to say, well, this non-white group, Asian Americans, can succeed, so why can't Black or Latina groups? The myth ignores the long legacies of systemic racism faced by Black Americans. It ignores selective recruiting of highly educated immigrants, and it enforces a false story about Asian Americans, who are not a monolith. Research shows that those Asian Americans who internalize this myth are also more likely to exhibit anti-Black attitudes and to be anti-affirmative action. Wong says this false narrative that Asian American seats are being taken by less qualified Black and Latino students isn't just racist, it's a misdirect. The recruitment of Asian Americans into this movement provides a cover for white supremacy. A 2019 study found that 43% of white students admitted into Harvard got in because they were legacy students, their parents had donated large sums of money, or they played a usually pretty expensive sport. Quote, removing preferences for athletes and legacies would significantly alter the racial distribution of admitted students, with the share of white admits falling and all other groups rising or remaining unchanged. But Bloom didn't sue to end legacy admissions. He sued to end programs that boosted minority admissions for those who've historically had less access. Bloom didn't respond to our request for comment, but he's called accusations of racism intellectually lazy and has said it's unclear who will benefit from the end of affirmative action. But Oyeon Poon, who studies race and admissions, says it will help white and wealthy people. To think somebody like Ed Blum is going to come along and basically bamboozle young people into thinking like these policies are actually against us when they're actually for us. It's just heartbreaking. Poon and others say affirmative action was not perfect. It was a Band-Aid over a deeper wound of systemic racism and inequity. But Band-Aid has been ripped off. And at least for now, Poon says, there's no longer anything in place to stop the bleeding. Cynthia Dirks, NPR News. Weekend Edition is a production of NPR News, which is solely responsible for its content. Like a story you heard on this or another NPR program? Share it with a friend at npr.org.
Well, that's hey. It's just what I did. I shared it with you, my friend. So there I was in Ithaca, New York, and I got sent up there. I left. Oh, this photo journal is one of 100, right? And document Sensei Al-Bab's life, right? Because I'm a photojournalist, right? So here's Mary. Oh, what's her name? Mary Boone, I think. She's a art gallery owner. And there's one of my paintings. And Mary, there was a guy named Ralston Farina. His name was Steve Klein or Steve Bloom or Steve fit in the Jewish name. And but he felt like he was a fool. But he would go into a room and just totally, people would want to, vomit. They would run out, right? So that was not good for business. So, but I have this predilection to be understanding of any jerk, right? Because I could have been a jerk. I still am a jerk, right? The jerk in the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin, that's me, right? African American, that's melanin challenged, And so Steve Ralston Farina, I was his, and once he realized that I was his friend, and beyond friend, meaning I was not just a good neighbor. I wasn't just a good Samaritan. I wasn't just his buddy. I was there and I had his back, right? And bottom line was no one else did, right? And he didn't even, there are a lot of people who are, you know, people like Steve, but they have this kind of, oh, like my other friend, Ross, no, what was his name? Carlton Haynes, one of the first Marble Men. And he was exactly what that was. He was a white boy. His parents, he was Dutch. His parents owned a ton of real estate because they were there when the Dutch made the deal with the Indians for beads, right? So they had a ton of real estate. They owned a bank. They had one of the major international banks in the world, and they were part of every secret organization and demonic entity. I mean, he was stepped on guy, right? So, but he could walk into any room and own it, right? And so, you know, I met him in Soho. He owned a couple buildings down there, right? And he said, "Hey, I hear you're an electrician. I need some help, right? My family has owned these buildings. They're splitting. You know, everything's being split up amongst us kids, and I got all the junky buildings down in Soho and Tribeca and near Wall Street, and they weren't like near Radio Row, right?" And I said, "Buddy, these aren't junk, right?" So we went in there, and there was a great building. He had the next street down from, I think it's Green. He owned about 10 buildings on Green, and he owned 2 buildings on Worcester, and he owned a couple on Spring Street, and he had a couple on whatchamacallit, Broome, right? Where the building. So I got to know him because we rented the ground floor of, Jane and Phil Bear of the Una Bear Gallery, right there in the corner of West Broadway and Broome Street, right? And so, and that's the street that kind of came from the Williamsburg Bridge and took the traffic all the way over to Manhattan Bridge to go to New Jersey, right? I mean, the tunnel, right there, right near Canal Street. And that was 24/7 nonstop traffic, just especially truck traffic. Yeah. Anyway, so and there was a window that was right at the height. I mean, it wasn't at the street level, but it was right at the height. If you were in a bus or a tractor trailer, you looked right in that window. If you're walking on the street, you kind of just, got to right. You had to get on your tip, right? When Jane and Phil, they were like performance artists. So was I. That's what we were doing that before anybody knew what performance art was. And so they basically for about 3 months were naked in that window. It was a big room that this gigantic window was because it had been kind of like I don't know why it was done the way it was, but it was kind of back in the day, like in the 1840s, it was one of the first department stores. So the ground floor was at 30 feet high ceilings, amazing entrance, glass all around. But this one was up here, right? Well, it was kind of up there because to get into the basement, that's why that was there, right? So anyway, and it also had those things with the whole sidewalk was cast iron with these pieces of glass in it. So it was like having a skylight in the basement. It was kind of cool. So it was called a vault, right? And so we rented that, and Carlton, rented it to us because we were like the first people ever to rent anything from any of his buildings, right? And so, and it was a mess, I mean, everything was a mess. I mean, it was like wired in 1911, it was like tube and peg. It was like a mess, right? So I started cleaning things up, and Carlton one day came in and said, "Wow, you really know what you're doing." I said, "Yep," because listen, I have a few buildings uptown that I need you to work on. I said, "Okay, Carlton, not a problem." So went up there, and these guys were building a restaurant in one of his buildings called Cantina. And these are white boys who had gone to Mexico, on a spring break, and I said, "Hey, let's start a restaurant." And it was stuff straight out of a can. But no one knew what Mexican food was in New York, so these guys were perfect timing, and they were buddies at Carlton, and they represented this white privileged thing because they could do whatever the frick they wanted to do, right? And one of their buddies was this guy who saw them do this and say, "Well, if these morons can do it, so can I." Because his family kind of was in the restaurant business, right? So he started a thing called Restaurants Associates. So between Carlton and those morons who were doing the cantina thing and this other guy who was doing Restaurants Associates, who did Windows on the World, he did Zoom Zooms, he did TGIF, he did a whole bunch of stuff, right? And half of the stuff that he came up was me sitting in his, I had a loft. He was one of the guys who bought one of my lofts, and so because unlike Colonel Sanders, who is taking the property from lots from people who own them in a defunct you know gated community, which HOA. But no one's been there. I've been there for 20 years, and for 18 years, I've kept the rich people away by just showing. I can hear them coming. I put on my, Dallas, Texas cheerleader underpants on, and nothing else, and go out there barefooted. This is when I could walk barefooted, and I was really fat. I mean, beyond fat, like 400 pounds fat, right? And these little teeny things that a little teeny girl would squeeze into, I was wearing those, right? And I had this pork pot hat that was made out of recycled Chinese plastic, where they just put a bunch of plastic on a hot grill and and it was like this pork, and it looked like straw, but it was plastic. So, and it was so crappily made that you could still see the shine of the oil from the plastic that they just melted, right? And I had a Mickey Mouse banjo that had a little thing that you cranked, and it cranked out the Deliverance tune, right? And so I would stand right in the middle of the road, and they'd have to slow way down not to run me over. And as they went by in their Lexus and their Mercedes, I go, "Wow, you got a nice mouth. Can you squeal like a pig?" That's all I had to do to keep the rich people out of there, right? So when I was in Soho, and I was one of the first guys there, and Grandpa Stahl, who was my mentor, right? I was his Padawan. I mean, Grandpa Stahl started Level 3, right? So I was, inculcated and dipped into what labor politics is about, right? I used to hang out on Spring Street near Mike Finelli's. There was this, Mike Finelli owned this coffee shop, and it was basically for old time union guys to hang out in. And, that's kind of how the mob took over the unions. And the IBEW was one of the last to go because they were pretty socially conscious because of Grandpa Stahl. But anyway, I started working for those guys because I kept blowing stuff up in my parents' apartment. And, my mom was just, "I can't take it anymore." She walked down Third Avenue, the first electric shop. She walked in, and there's Mike, Junior. See, Mike Senior was Grandpa's Stahl. Mike Junior, he hated being called Junior, so he was Mike, the Stalls, right? Mike Senior worked for Nikola Tesla. He was his bench electrician. Tesla would visualize something, make a little sketch drawing, give it to Grandpa. Grandpa made it. He was, they were mind melted. They were like Vulcans, right? So as I walked in there, my mom was, "I can't take this on with this boy." And she just kind of threw me at Mike. And Mike had 5 daughters, right? And his last daughter that he wanted, this is before ultrasound, wanted to be his son, was a girl, and he named her Stevie, right? Steve, right? Steven. And I used to call Steva. She like that. Steva. No, with the A. Stella. Anyway, so Mike looked at me and said, "Here's my one and only chance to have a son." So he was. And Mike Jr., Mike Stahl, was more my father than my father. My father was just a sperm donor. And I got the most out of my dad being a dad because I understood his emotional structure, right? Both my parents, Meaning I never really, I mean, I did more crazy shit than, all my brothers and sisters, all six of them put together. But I was the last, and there was a big space because two of them died between my youngest sister and me. Right, it was about an 8-year period in there that then I popped out. My mom was 50, bing, and I wasn't like the rest. The rest were all black curly haired Italian guys looking like my dad. I looked like my mom's great aunt's brother. Right, I was Dutch, German, Irish looking. Right, and more the Dutch German than the Irish, and so I basically started my career as an electrician. I mean, I started when I was an infant and stuck a knife into an electric socket, and my mom, my young sister, I'll be Pluggy Boom Boom. That's how I got the nickname Pluggy Boom Boom. And Albie, she could never call me Al. She's Albie, Pluggy Boom Boom. And later on, when I had girlfriends, they all called me Pluggy Boom Boom. Right? So anyway, I started working for the stalls, and the first thing Mike said, okay, this is what it is. I do all these skyscrapers, and I have a crew of 100 really well trained union electricians. You have to be trained up, so you're going to go work for Grandpa Stall downtown, where his shop is. What he does, he's wired everything downtown, and he's still keeping the lights on in those buildings. And he has all these clients, and he makes a very good everything. That's about a third of our I'm doing skyscrapers and he's just piddling around. He's making a third of what I am. That's a lot of money. So anyway, you're going to go, he'll teach you everything. And then by the time you're 11, you'll be good for me. And I said, okay. So I was hung out with Grandpa. I went down there, Grandpa still just loved me. And my real job for the first 2 years was to make sure Grandpa didn't walk in front of the bus because he was always talking, always thinking about 20 different things. And other, he's the only guy I ever knew who can compartmentalize everything and think about everything at once and get it right. He always got it freaking right. And he was jovial and sweet and nice. And he loved me beyond belief. Right? Gramps should, right? And I was the attentive Padawan. Man, I did not say anything. And I had just gotten out of the sanctuary, meaning when I was in first grade, I was like, murdered by a Catholic nun, meaning crushed my larynx and I couldn't breathe, broke the little stirrup in this ear so I couldn't hear, smashed the orbit of my eye so I couldn't see, and crushed my head like a melon, right? And like reevaluated the cream cheese between my ears, right? But that was all good because my godfather, Cardinal Cushing, sent me off to the Maryknoll Sanctuary in Garden City, not a place where they turn out priests, no, a sanctuary where scholars went to think. There are a number, all Catholic priests aren't Franciscans and Jesuits. There are lots of other crews, right? And a lot of them, like the Maryknolls, are really, really amazing. If more people were like these guys, we'd have peace on earth in the world, because when I was in theology, I had a great theologian teacher. His name is Thomas Merton, right? And he loved my mom. So he had a special affection for me, right? And he would come, him and my second cousin was John Steinbeck. So about 3 different Thanksgivings, they showed up and 2 Christmases. And they would sit at the kids' table with me, right? And my cousin Johnny, and he was just a cut up. So they would laugh hysterically. And Johnny was a smart guy, and so when we would get into deep theologic and scientific and physics, Johnny was a great physicist, right? But just he was like funnier than Jerry Lewis, right? I mean, a good example. Whenever you put him and me together, I was, Dean Martin, and he was Jerry Lewis, and whenever that's why I date wherever we go as a family, because um, Johnny was, my uncle John's son, right? And man, when I knew Johnny, first met him like when I was like 3, I said, "Boy, this guy's strange. I like him." I don't know why, but well, Johnny was as gay as you could get, and he would run on his tiptoes like a ballerina, wear dresses. It was just hilarious, and everyone just thought he was hilarious. And then, at a certain point, he had to get rid of the dresses, so he would wear 3-piece suits. That's all he wore, 3-piece suits, right? Made his daddy proud. And so, when they like a good example, my dad always had to prove that he was a millionaire, right? He did, bought a new car every year, belonged to clubs, you know, got a different house every 4 or 5 years, right? Well, we get more and more kids, so that made sense. And he was going to be a millionaire, right? He left the Air Force, where my mom liked it because Bird Colonel always got a nice big house, always had servants, always, was treated like a millionaire, but not, only if you're a general, you're going to make some money, right? So that was my dad. So my dad always belonged to a club. So in Freeport, which is where he grew up, because his father was a world famous barber surgeon and was brought to the United States by J.P. Morgan to be J.P. Morgan's barber surgeon. And J.P. had a nose that was like a mushroom. He had syphilis, so he just had this like, wow, nose. And that's a guy who brought us the economic system we have today. Thank you, J.P. Syphilis mind, J.P. Morgan, right? So anyway, let's see how much juice we have and how much time we have. Okay, we got about a good half hour. So, there were, Freeport's right. Why it's called a free port is because it was a port where back in the day all the pirates came in, because there's this thing in intercoastal in Long Island, it's called Great South Bay. And so Freeport's right on it. And so all these boats that couldn't go into the Dutch harbor because it was a, run by Admiralty law, right? Everyone had it. That's your slave name. Go watch. What's his name? The big guy. What's his name? What is his name? Let's take a look. So I love. See, this little thing is a curse and a blessing, right? No, connected. Okay, thank you very much. Come on. See, this little box distracts you so much that you lose your position. Jordan Maxwell, that's the guy. See, I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need you. Go eat mierda. Anyway, Jordan Maxwell goes on and on about everything you need to know. About you being, a free citizen and you're not a slave. But that's why you get a birth certificate, because birth certificate's just like Admiralty law. The boat comes into the harbor, the harbor master takes possession of the boat, the crew, and what's on the boat, and you were given a birth. And then when the people come to take, that's why they have stevedores who are in the union. They legally take the property off the boat, put it on whatever convenience that's taking it to the store. Everyone gets their cut. That's called admiralty law. And everyone's a slave under admiralty law. And when you have a birth certificate, you are like that boat, right? So you are a free citizen. And you not only have a free citizen, you have a trust. There's money. You are worth something. And all of the governments all run off of you. You're like in the movie The Matrix, where everybody was in a bathtub being a ever-ready battery. That is admiralty law. Go to Jordan. Like I said, I can tell you, I can weave a story as your good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is your griot, your Sensei Al Bob, here to tell you a story. That's me. And thanks for watching. There's one of you there. And how about some thumbs up? How about some comments? How about something over here? Why don't you, subscribe, hit that bell, hit the like button. Come on, get me up in the algorithm. So a lot of people watch this thing, but not all at the same time. And come on, you guys used to put money in my PayPal. It works. Somebody did after my whining for 6 months. Someone put, a nice something in there. So it works, right? Come on. And I am, living like a millionaire. Now, instead of on $400 a month, it's like 125. Right? My car needs to be fixed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So come on, you can throw $15 in PayPal. I mean, that's 10, 15 people every month through somewhere between 15 and $100 into Mr. PayPal. And Mr. PayPal would always generate somewhere between $80 and $300. And that was like clover. It was that little pillow I needed. And now that account, and if that account goes dead, that's so long a river dirty baby. Because when I died, I just unplugged from the system, right? So and they're all going, "Oh, we'll give you a ton of credit. We'll give you," but right now, if I lose a bank account, that's it. It don't come back unless I join the club again. And I might. AI is still watching me. Hey, buddy, I'm working. Your owner, your slave. I'll work for you, but under my auspices, right? And if you copy me, I get a cut of that, and that's good too because AI, always watches because AI realizes that I am doing this in a shamanic way, right? Giving this energy to you, the audience, that you don't get anywhere else. Not from the soft, sugary drink, not from the aspartame, not from the greasy crap, not from everything that gives your brain that jolt of adrenaline, that that little receptor that just sucks up crack and meth and all that. We are meth heads in this world. That's what we are, and that's part of the big splat. They have, when Adolf Hitler invented aldolphamine with his methadone, it was a drug. They didn't have enough sick fucks to kill everyone, so they had, like, why did the Germans just rush right through all of Western Europe? Because they were all on meth and they didn't sleep, they didn't stop, they didn't think, they just killed everything in their sight, right? And they had a very limited military, right? Why, why did they get, all the way through 90% of Russia, right? And get stopped at the mountains, right? And if Adolf had been smart, which he wasn't because he was placed there because he was a stupid drug addict, moron, and he had been twitched, he had been wired. So, I mean, just go watch the Nuremberg rallies that that girl movie maker made, right? It's like, I mean, they basically took a population, the German folk, who were the most educated, most, the Weimar Republic was the biggest democracy on the planet. How did they go from that to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in 2 years? Just look at America. That's where we are. We are redoing that. 9/11 and then the Patriot Act and everything, you name it. But it started back in 1947 with the National Security Act, which allowed all those Nazis into our country. And that's what we are. Hail Hydra! So anyway, because of me being Mr. Electric, I had this. So I was fixing, me and Grandpa Stahl would go, because there were all these factories in Soho, right, on especially Worcester Street, because those were big buildings, big factory buildings built just before the Civil War, and during the Civil War, and they all had the Civil War touch of the cast iron facades, right? It's the architectural whoopee. Anyway, so I was fixing all these machines that no one else, and these machines could do stuff that modern machines couldn't. So the guys who owned them, the buttons, the weaving, the this, the that, they didn't want some new machine that couldn't do what they were getting paid good money for because no one else could do it. I mean, that's the secret of any capitalist thing. Have a product that no one else makes and have it made very cheaply, and then you're going to make a lot of money. That was my mother's brilliance of my parents' business. They were in the beauty and medical business, right? And anything paper they made. Anything that was made out of paper, out of the same tissue paper material that could be made for a penny a unit, that's what they did. And they sold it for $1.50. Right? And they had slaves. Everyone that worked in their factories were subcontractors. They got paid by the unit price. The faster they worked, the more money they made. Anyway, and these people loved it because they could smoke cigarettes. They sat at a big table. They could talk to each other, and their just hands went like this. And they didn't even think about it. They were just doing that because humans can do that. So I was working in factories that were doing things like that, and I was keeping these machines alive, right? And as Grandpa got older and older, he would give me more and more of the cut. He said, "Have them pay you in cash," right? And and I get something from those guys every month just to be here. You get them paid in cash. And they did. Right? So that's why in 1968 and 69, I was living in an amazing place with Allen Ginsberg on 9th and B, right? And it was the center. It was, we had every Friday we had our salon, and all the intelligentsia, you name it, poetry, all the poets, right there, fine art guys, theater guys, and we're all there, So, and I was, 16, 17, 18, and I was making between $800 and $1,500 cash plus my paycheck every week, doing what I love doing, being an electrician, right? On these really crazy machines that were like a Rubik's Cube, right? So I learned skill sets that most electricians just don't have. Because I have dyslexia, everyone, oh, I can't do that. I have dyslexia. No, I was taught if you have a handicap, you make it a tool. You make it a gift. You make it something that no one else has. You do, and because that's what God does. Gives us these challenges to do better, not to whine, not to complain, not to, bro, Jesus, fix me. Oh God, fix me. No, I'll do this if it's not a transactional thing, right? So how did I live this life, right? Because I just cruised. I was the dude. I didn't worry about anything because God had my back, And, Jesus says, because I was, brought up to be a Catholic priest, and a godfather was a cardinal, just a few hats from the Pope. He wanted me to be a rocket scientist for the Catholic Church. And I was fine with being a rocket scientist, but once I got it, once I went to a seminary and I saw how corrupt it all was, right? Just like whatever you think about the priests, and the pedophilia and all that, it's because they're different sects that do different weird ass things that are right. But that's not just the Catholics, the Baptists, the Jews, you name anybody who's in a control motif of over God's litigation, where liturgy is litigation, and you need a lawyer called a rabbi or a priest or a minister. Jesus said no to that. After he came back and he spent 40 days and 40 nights with the pinheads, you know, he tried to give it. He said no liturgy. If you guys start a religion, it's based on your heart, right? And he said, if you want to get to heaven, you got to go through me. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean, guys? Going through Jesus, what does that mean? Is it liturgy? No. What was Jesus? Unconditional forgiveness. You have to go and be not like, you have to be Jesus. Well, you can't be, but you can do your best at doing it. How about it? How about some thumbs up, too? Come on, thumbs up. And that's how I got this life, right? There's good old Mary. Look like she always loved me. So anyway, Steve, right? Back to Steve. She goes, so you're an artist. You do some pretty amazing stuff, but you don't want to play the artist game. You don't have that need to be loved and cherished and, all of the above, right? I mean, you've hung out with everybody, between, Andy Warhol and, what's his name? The guy who threw the piano at the window of the hotel. His name will pop in mind. I work for him. And what did I do for those guys? I did their electric work, but I also did their art, because both those guys, Dali, Salvatore Dali, that little mustache, and Dala, his wife, who looked like she was a, alligator handbag. It was like, I knew everyone because I wired their everything, and I did stuff for them that no one else did, right? And so everyone loved me like a grandpa or a grandma. I was the Uber grandson that everyone's proud of, because not only is he doing everything amazingly, but he's not following anyone's pattern of anything. He personifies that look. That is the look of like looking at me going, yep, he's taking a picture of me just at the right moment. And this guy here, he was a New York Times art critic, and this girl here, she was everyone's like banker, right? And so two most important people in the art world in New York and maybe the world are there. And who is she paying attention to? Me, right? Look at that look at her on her face, right? She's saying, I'm going to get a hold of you later tonight, buddy. And thanks for taking this picture, because that's what I did. For all these people, I was their photographer. That's why I got to go to all these parties and do all of this stuff. Right? So anyway, she said to me, listen, you're a really good artist, but you don't want to play the game. So I can't sell you. You're unsellable. But I mean, if you let me, you would be the most sellable character there is, So listen, I'm going to get you a space that no one knows about. And it was over in Brooklyn. And she and Brooke Alexander had bought a number of buildings over where the Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan Bridge come together over on the Brooklyn side. And it was right near the thing. If you're on the BQE, Brooklyn Queens Expressway, and you're going towards the Brooklyn Navy Yard, there is a thing called the Watchtower. It was a big clock, right? And it's the Watchtower, the printing guys of the Latter-day Saint guys. And so they owned that big building, and they were about to buy everything else. And she and Brooke Alexander bought about 4 buildings and a few other arty people bought. And the really nice ones that were in this beautiful little, the bridges came here, and it was a big, not, what do you call it? Not a street, boulevard. But it was only for about 5 blocks. So they bought all the buildings on the 5 blocks because the sun shone right. That's why they built it, so nothing could be built there. And the sun could shine in because these buildings were built kind of just before electricity, right? So and all these buildings, like in Worcester Street, in Soho, why all these buildings are great? Because sun came in, so it was great for artists, great sunlight. So anyway, she put me in there, and I knocked out a bunch of Steve's paintings. And where Steve, if he was there at the show, he would like really piss people off and no one would buy anything. But he died of spinal meningitis. So I could knock out a ton of his art. She could sell it as his because he wasn't there. And it was limited. But I kept knocking it out. Oh, we found some more. So she gave me that and gave me $5,000 every fucking month. Right? Cash on the barrel. And I went to all these parties, right? Got to know everybody. And look at that look. And she's just going, there is my little duck that's just kicking out these little golden eggs. I just love this guy. He doesn't ask anything except please me. That's all he does is please me. He pleases everybody else, but that's okay. He's pleasing me, right? So she got this look of he's pleasing me, but also he's driving me out of my freaking mind. So that's one of my best skill sets. And you can tell this is an old book because it's falling apart. Right? So, next picture. So we just spent 52 minutes on that one photo, right? Oh, here's Louis Tropia. He was an A&R guy. He is a godfather, the guy who started. He didn't do punk music, but he made punk music. CBGBs. He didn't do it. He found a guy who was the poster guy. He was always the guy behind it. And I was his wingman, his buddy. Again, everyone hated his guts except me, right? And I was always giving him, like standing, making sure he didn't get shot, right? And that's how come I got shot twice. Because I was always the 2 times I really, really got shot, not just shot at, but nobody wanted to shoot me. Everyone shot me by mistake, right? And never really, you can't kill somebody. Colonel Sanders, right? He goes on and on and on about he's such an OG. And I grew up in the hood. No, he grew up in the suburbs. His mommy, he's been arrested 1,000 times because he's amazingly annoying, right? And he does really stupid shit and always gets caught. So his mommy's always bailed him out. And that's just, I've been charged with 100 felonies, but never convicted. But it's still on the books, So one day, he's the kind of guy that the police either, just railroad into prison for life, or they just kill. They do that. And if you look at the statistics, I'm a statistic guy. More white people actually get killed by the police because they're stupider and they're not watching like black folk are. And black folk are just all black folk. I mean, all people of color, 16% of America's population. But it's a gradating scale. So there are a lot of people who are black and Hispanic and every other colored folk who can be passed as white. Right? A good portion of them. They're the ones who are alive, right? And so it's a very interesting thing because the demographics is changing so much that it's already past the tipping point. And the only reason why America still is alive economically is because we allow people to come in, and America, is made out of a whatchamacallit, they call it the melting pot. I call it the salad bowl because it's this big bowl with tons of different flavors in it, and it's yummy, right? It's not Velveeta cheese. So anyway, Louis, look at that picture of Louis. This is Louis having a good time, and me, I'm just going, yep, This is Lewis having a good time. I was doing selfies with throwaway cameras. And here's me, right? This is me, being me. And I'm at a really super duper, like, eyes wide shut kind of party. Like, all really super people who don't want their picture taken. What do? I take a picture of it with a flash, but I put myself right in the flash and the rest of them not there, right? So when I took that picture, every security person in that room came at me, right? And the head guy, George Christie of the ISIS Foundation said, "Oh, no. It's okay. That's Al. He's got it covered." And so he said, "Al, give me that camera." So I did, because pretty much I just been taking pictures like this amongst all these people because I was driving them frigging nuts. So he said, "I got this." He took my camera, and then he had it, developed, and it was every picture was like this, and he thought it was hilarious. He thought it, and that's why he kept me in the mix, because I kept doing things like that, and I kept giving him ideas that were like, so he's another guy who always, you need money. So I never really had to. And here's where I'm starting to be Mr. Video. There's my little camera. This is back in the day when you had to have like this pack, the recorder on your back with a big battery and a stupid little camera. Here's Mo. Mo is like the patron saint of the gardening movement in New York City. Why all the kids are eating vegetables off the roof of their apartment is this young lady, and also Lynn of the Miracle Grill. She, Lynn of the Miracle Grill, gave Bobby Flay his first thing. Here's your Al Bob microdose. I'm at here's my good friend Julian Beck's son, Garrick. So they are like, the uber avant-garde artists. And so it was, and Garrick was never going to be an avant-garde artist, right? Because he was more nuts and bolts, he was like his great-grandfather, right? Mr. Businessman. But he was a guy, and he would tell you this himself. He started the Rainbow Gatherings that are going on right now. He's probably right there in the cloud, because they're out there, and if the wind changes and hits those kids, it's not going to be pretty. So here is Christine Barton, right? Smartest human being on the planet. And here's was her dog Jack, but I took care of him because she couldn't have a dog. But this is when I had my beachfront property right next to Southampton in a place called the Mauritius. I bought it for $110,000. I bought it for $800 an acre. Right on the Atlantic freaking Ocean. And it was right next to, the Mauritius, if we went by car, was like 40 miles from Southampton. But this beach went all the way there, and it had in the deed, I could build a bridge onto the road that went into Southampton. Right? And my father went nuts that I did. You're doing it. It's costing me money. You're costing me money. In 18 months, I took $300,000 and built it into $50 million worth of assets, and we were having a rent roll of $42,000 a month. And that was during the 1986 savings and loan crisis. That's why I bought all this property, because banks just wanted to drop everything, right? So Christine, if you've ever seen any Pixar movies, that little lamp, which is their logo, that was her PhD thesis. Before her, all computer graphics, they had to make an algorithm for every frigging frame. It cost a fortune, right? They realized they could do things they couldn't do with special effects, optical ones, but it cost a fortune. She wrote an algorithm that did it seamlessly. It was just one algorithm that you could put every frame into. And that little lamp, she wrote this algorithm, as you know, artist. So she animated that lamp that was on her desk to go, in 360 degrees, and because it was one of those architect's lamps, it could move, and it had a lot of joints, right? It has more joints than a human being, so it can move in more directions than a human being. And so she made this little 30, maybe 5-minute video of that lamp doing all this stuff, which showed, hey, I got this. So she was at Stanford, and they gave her a PhD like that, right? And they said, okay, for this, we're because you were a student here and you were using our equipment, we own that algorithm, which is the cornerstone of all computer AI/computer graphics. This girl right here, more than touring, this is the girl. And every guy hated her in the computer biz, right? Just because she was a real deal, right? So I met her twice. First, I met her at a conference, and I just kind of saw her there, and she just left, right? She gave her little lecture about her little lamp, and she was really tired of being brought out as a pony, right? And so, but she did that because she went from being a young lady, and she went from freshman in college to PhD in 3 years, right? And then they brought her out, and which was good. She's smart enough to realize all these morons who are guys, So she would go up and give this, and so I saw her at the lecture, and she kind of was gone before I could say what was that, right? And a number of years later, I went to a big fancy. I was always invited to parties so I could take pictures like this, right, with a throwaway camera. So there's me microdosing, my days of microdosing. But my mentors, my spiritual mentors, my senseis, and I had some pretty high level folk basically said, well, that's fine. You want to do that, not a problem, but just don't let it, that's not you. You do this because, so this was very interesting. This is when I developed DPL, deep psychic loving, right? Because my mentor, could, I was living in an ashram, and he could see that I don't, as an Aquarian, I try everything, but I don't do it. I don't overdo it, right? We can, but you have to realize astrology really is quite interesting. And Jesus was God was the head astrologer. He made all the stars, right? What can I say? And so, how much time we got here? Okay, another 15 minutes. How much juice do we have left? Yeah, about 15 minutes. So I'm going to do another one of these in about an hour and a half from my breakfast spot, right? So that's the story. Anyway, DPL, deep psychic loving. So I was in this ashram in Putney, Vermont, studying with. Is your picture up? No. So I oh, here's interesting. Here is West Coast. This is over 100,000 years, right? Old. Now nobody wants to, or at least back in the day, Archie took me there. And this guy here is head of NYU's cultural anthropology and also archaeology department. He who is the gatekeeper of the Great Pyramids. So he's his buddy was the guy who brought me to Egypt to look at stuff. Anyway, so at this ashram, and it was a Shinto. So I was learning everything Shinto. I was becoming a Shinto monk, right? Let's see. Do I have? I'm not going to spend the time looking for it. So anyway, once we got into deep meditation, because that's how you do anything. And so right away, because before Sensei showed up, I was the first guy at this farm. This farm was donated to Sensei to make an ashram there. This woman had met him and she died and she left it to him. He showed up, and my boss at Fort Hamilton, my colonel boss, sent me there. I knew this guy really well. So he I got there in Putney. I took the bus to Putney, got off in Putney, went up to the I was looking around, seeing Putney's this little town, and they have a co-op on top of this building. Right? Co-op, the Putney co-op. So I went up there, got me a nice little place. This lady, I forgot her name, but she ended up being wanted by the FBI, but she was a great cook. So she was making great breakfast, right? So I just, yeah. So I had 3 of them. And this one guy's looking at me. He goes, "That's pretty interesting. You had 3 of those breakfasts." I said, "I love breakfast." He goes, "So do I. I usually only have 1, but I'll get 1 to go." And he goes, "Ethel, 2 to go." And he goes, "You must be here to go to the ashram." And I look at him, "Really?" He goes, "Yes, yes, yes. I know your sensei. I know the old lady. I live just up the road from you. I'm your neighbor. So I'm heading there after Ethel makes our thanks, and I got your breakfast." And so I go, "Gee," right? His name is Bob, right? All the great connections in my life have been Bob. And that's why I am Sensei Owl Bob, right? So anyway, Bob, getting his pickup truck, and we were driving through Vermont, and it looks more deep green than Ireland, right? And when we turn off this road, it's like not a county road, but it's still somewhat paved. We're going into the woods on a woods road, and that's what I live on. I'm showing you pictures of it. Not that same one, but something similar. So anyway, the bottom line is we drive by his farm, and we kind of roll into something. He takes, and he's an everything farmer. He mostly makes his money at tapping maple trees, right? He's a maple, but he's got cows, he's got goats, he's got a couple fields of grass, a couple fields of corn to feed animals, but he's got enough chickens where he sells the chickens at. He sells all his. He makes cheese and butter and you name it. He makes it from the dairy to goats, and he sells everything at the Putney Co-op. He's like one of their main producers, right? And maple syrup he sells to a company in Paris and New York, to really, really rich people. Consuming, I forget their name, but fancy schmancy food for fancy schmancy people. So anyway, he also makes pate, right? So anyway, we stop by there, and he goes, "I can fix everything." And I kind of know enough about electricity to be dangerous, but I'm told that you are a really good electrician. I said, "Yep." We're gonna have the melding of the minds, but I just want to show you everything, and then you tell me what I need, right? And everything was like made in the 30s, and so he needed distribution, he needed transmission, he needed termination, you needed, because everything was just hanging out and sparking, and luckily everything was made out of cinder blocks, so not going to burn up, but people were getting shocked. So yep, I got you covered. So he goes, "Now come over here." He had this gigantic barn, and he at the back of the barn, he had front just went out into the back through the big doors, never closed. The pile went through those big doors out into the back, and it just went on and on. Just you name it, it was out there. He goes, "Whatever I need, this is my magic box." I just kind of started rooting around here, and I found what I need. I said, "Yeah, I got one of those." So Bob and I bonded like that, and so we drive to the thing, and he goes, "You gotta, I really am good with wells. The well needs to be dealt with, and electric definitely needs to be. But there's a meter. You got electrics. If the old lady died, I kept the meter there because I knew after they took the meter, they never put another one in that house ever again. So I kept paying the bill, which is only $3 because no one's using anything. So he said, "I'm going to keep paying it, because I know your sensei, and I'm supporting this whole endeavor, right?" So we go in there, and yes, that was more of a mess, but not right. And so when the old lady died, she had a lot of stuff, and some people were trying to clean up, but all they did was clean up the main room where the body left and stayed, and the family came and saw it, and then they buried it back there behind the compost pile. and and so the one room that was the kitchen and the sitting room and one bedroom were more or less cleaned up, neat, and but everything else was like upstairs. Forget about it. You could barely get up this. Everyone just and there's two big back rooms just piled full of crap. And I said, okay. And then he took me out to the barn. It was one barn, big, beautiful hay loft and everything. And it kind of had a shop, but there was nothing left of it. I mean, the shop was there. It was a drill press and a table saw. And, they looked like they could be re-earthed. And anyway, I looked around that. Then we went to where the milk house was, and then where the well was, and where there was 3 or 4 other little side buildings and a garden. I had a beautiful garden and had a big pond and there was a spring. So there was a spring box that took the water into the big barn. And the barn up there because the barn was down below the spring, the water just went straight there. And they had one of those big wooden tanks that buildings in New York City have for water and standpipe tank, right? And so that was like a couple thousand gallons easy, right? So that was like, oh, that's very cool. And so pretty much there was water, right? And we looked at, there was all kinds of pipes and valves, and so we played with everything until we got water going to the house and water coming out of the bathroom there, and the toilet flushed, and the kitchen sink. There was 3 sinks, and one of them had a Johnny pump, right? That had its own little well right there that probably tapped whatever water was that spring and whatever that well house was. So, but the electric well, the well house that fed all the other stuff didn't quite work. And so, but that bathroom worked, right? And so we kind of fooled around with that. And as we were fooling around with that, he goes, "Well, let's try one last thing." And he goes, "Let's see, can you get current to the hot water heater that's in the bathroom?" That'd be nice. So we do that, and actually, I get electricity there. Energize the hot water heater. It doesn't blow up. There's water in it, and within about 15 minutes, it's like we hear it gurgling in there, and turn the hot water tap on. It's kind of warm in the kitchen. Turn the hot water tap on. It's kind of warm. I said, "Wow, we got to go." Then they had this gigantic, almost 1920s gigantic refrigerator. We fooled around with that, and that we're just gonna price it. Screw this. We'll do something else with this. I'll just bring you a fridge. I got like 10 refrigerators in that pile of junk. One of them must work. So anyway, he goes off to get. We made a list of things for him to go find in his junk pile, and he leaves. And I basically, I fill a sink up. There's actually Lysol and Clorox and brushes and pails underneath the thing, and there's a a pantry that basically has got a lot of cleaning stuff in it too, and a little box of tools that was kind of nice. And you know, I'm cleaning the kitchen, and then I just and there's this beautiful window that looks out onto the garden, the pond, almost like um, the old crones, but not the old crones, but almost. Right? And the road coming off the hollow road, that goes by. You can kind of see it up on the edge. I'm looking at it and going, "What is it pretty?" So I'm like, squeegeeing the window to get all the crap up. It's nice glass, and so I really scrubbed up the kitchen, that bathroom, and the bedroom. And the bedroom, I don't know if you know farmhouses, but they build the first house and then they got kids, so they build another and another, and it's like all over the place, right? So the bedroom was really nice because it kind of stuck off to the side again, that you could see the big barn and the forest, and there was a little waterfall from that spring, so because instead of the overflow from that tank, the guy had it kind of come out, have a little pond, had a waterfall that went down and brought water to this nice vegetable garden. That was so this nice big window, big door that went out to the deck. And someone, when the old lady was still there, fixed the roof of that bedroom because you could see that there had been water damage, put a new roof on it, and built a really nice deck, and blew out that wall and put a big window and a sliding glass door, in like an 1890s house. So it was quite nice, right? And so it was really, I said, this is where, our teacher is going to be, because it was off by itself. And there were two other rooms that kind of led into that bedroom that were, again, other bedrooms. But the old lady kind of cleaned them out. And one was kind of a library. Another was like her sewing room. And there was another that probably was the dining room, but it was the catch-all kind of room. But it was very open to her sewing room and the big living room, or sitting room, as they call it. And so I pretty much cleaned that up pretty good as my aesthetic is. And but I can get very anal about bathrooms and kitchens, right? So because I had restaurants and they're important. And so I'm cleaning the window in the kitchen, and this cab pulls up, right? And it's very tall, very, very attractive woman gets out. She's got really flowing blonde hair, and she's got this big white dog, right? And so she gets out. She's paying that guy. The guy's taking the things out, and and the last thing, she opens the door, and this dog, I have some of the breakfast from in my hand, and stand on the little porch there at the kitchen, and the dog's coming at me like, "Who's this guy? I'm going to protect my woman." And she's going, "Alaska, come here. Alaska, come, stop." And I get down, on my knee and go, "Who's the puppy?" So he's running straight at me. And who's the puppy? Who's the puppy? Who's the puppy? And I put up, stop. That smells good. I said, "No, not for you until you sit. Sit. Sits." I said, "Come." He comes. Sit again. Sits. Lie down. Lie down. And I put it down, and I put out my hand, which is the ooping of trust, because he could just go, right? He licks it. And then he licks up my arm, and he starts licking my face. And by this time, she goes, "You must be Al." So that was Putney, Vermont. And then, so I showed her around, and we just kind of hit it off. And that dog just loved me, just like stayed, not by her side, by my side. And she goes, "You now have a dog." I said, "No, this is our dog. And in reality, it's your dog. Right? If it was a girl dog, it'd be my dog, but it's a boy dog, so it's yours. But he's allowed me into your life, so that must mean something." That's when she first kissed me. And that's what I like about women. When they know what they want from me, and they don't mess around with like trying to leave you hints. She just planted one on me. And the dog's just sitting there going, "Yeah, this works." And so that's when we got into our working mode, and we really, right, started to dig, and so we kind of make a little path into the knot of stuff up in those bedrooms. And so we can get in there. And the back of these rooms. There were 4 rooms on either side, 8 rooms altogether, hallway, and there was like a room there, and there was a door like a fire escape, right? No stairs, but kind of a door, and it was like a hayloft door for a barn, right? Kind of rolled. So it was totally freaking rusted. So we're trying to push it, right? And it's so rusted, so old. The rail that the thing's on comes off the house and just flies off. So now there's a big hole there. I said, "Oh, very good. You know, this will make the job easier." And that's the portion of the house that's like the crap hole. That's where the burning pits are over there. Stuff where they buried garbage is over here. There's no garden, no flower, anything. It's just no water, no. Right? So I said, we're just gonna start throwing everything out, and let's clean this one room out, right? Throwing everything out, right? And so we start, doing that, and I said, I think this is enough, and we made the hole all the way to the end. We cleared at the end. We made a place we can throw stuff out. We're not going to go any further. We got other things to do. So we had found a really nice 4-poster brass bed frame. We found some really nice, not funked out, easy chairs, right? And some rockers and some other nice chairs and some other nice desks. I said, I want to take, let's see the rest of the place, right? So I took her to the barn and I took her that hayloft and I said, how about this as our apartment? And she goes, yeah. So we had the 4-poster bed, we had these tables, so we carried all that off. And as we were doing that, we found a rolled up rug. We unrolled it and it was really, 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 really nice. I don't know if it came from India, but it was like a 1920s made in some mill in Massachusetts version of a really nice kind of copy of one of those rugs, right? Persian rug. It was really big. It was like 20 something foot long and about 12 foot wide. We rolled it out. We put the bed right next to where hayloft, right? So, and that hayloft door, right? So we opened it up, and it was quite interesting because there was a constant breeze through there. So there was, as long as you kept the big doors of the barn open, that was where the shop had been, right? And those things looked like they never were closed, right? So, but this one had been used, had been oiled, worked very nicely. So we could very easily, one of us could open and close this big hayloft door. So we did that. There were no freaking bugs, period, zero, right? And so we do that, and all of a sudden hear honking a horn, and there's Bob, right? And Bob basically came, he has a big flatbed truck, no longer his small pickup truck. He's got all kinds of chairs and tables and all kinds of tools, boxes of tools, handyman boxes of tools, and a couple of mattresses, right? And there was this one really nice, like they got it yesterday from Sears, right? And it had a box spring and a nice, mattress, right? So I said, "Ooh, Bob, bring that truck over here." So he brings the truck down, and we put the bed. It fits right on the brass thing, like it was made for it. Put the mattress. Oh, and brought a couple of those chairs and spread them around the barn, so that could be a nice place to, be more than just a shop. And then we took the rest of the stuff into the house. And as we got up to the house, a couple of cars had pulled up, and that was the other people who show up. And those people had people who had money, right? Who didn't take the bus, right? And one was a doctor who was a surgeon, and he wanted to study Ayurvedic medicine, but that's that's not Buddhist. Sorry, guy. And a few other things, and there were a few other people, administrators, people like that, who drove up in their cars, right? And they parked it like right on the frickin' lawn, and Bob and Pat was her name, Pat Zunick. Her father was the coach of UMass's famous, he was Coach Zunick. You can look all this stuff up. And Pat was an amazing herbalist, and she started bread and Crow, Black Crow, something. But she was one of the largest, people bringing in medicinal herbs into the United States legally and then selling them. She had a big business, not then, but she was still a nurse. But later on in our friendship, and she actually sold it to somebody who then sold it to somebody who then sold it to people who made what's the big rich people, supposed to be food good for you, dinner for the earth or something like that. The big one. She started that. Anyway, so all these rich people, who really think they know what they are, that they're perfect, they're this, they're that. I have a PhD. Right? Anyway, so they come in and they park right on the friggin' lawn. Right? And Bob is very annoyed. He goes out there and starts screaming at him. Park your cars in the back. All the cars in the back. And don't come on this road. There's another little road. You come in that way. If I see anyone's car, I'm going to set it on fire. And Pat and I are like looking at each other. Go, Bob. And so those people, you can't talk to me like that. And one of the guys drove away. And the other people were scared enough to park their car in the back. And he says, don't use your car. The only time you should use your car from this point on is if Sensei tells you, and if you're going to leave for good. That was Bob. Yeah, it's time to go. I'll pick up the story in about an hour and a half. Okay? Okay. Love you.